Hi everyone, welcome to Ageless, the program dedicated to the idea that when it comes to aging, attitude counts more than the number of candles on your cake. My name is Prill Boyle and I'm your host. Today my guest is Joan Blumenfeld. She has been for the last 16 years a geriatric care manager and knows all about the ins and outs of aging. So Joan, thank you so much for being on the show. Is that true that you know all about the ins and outs of aging?
I don't know all about, but I know a lot about.
You know a lot. You advocate 3 simple practices for aging gracefully. 1, keep moving. 2, keep working. And 3, keep connected. What I would love to do is to talk to you about why each of these is so important, and then I'd like to find out how you are putting them into practice in your own life, and then let's talk about how other people can do that as well. So let's talk about keeping moving. Why is that so important?
It is absolutely crucial. I know for myself, for my family members, and for my clients, when people stop moving and get sedentary, either out of choice or medical necessity, it's lethal. A whole cascade of events begin to happen. It's easier to fall. We are meant to keep moving.
Right.
So I find that if it's humanly possible, and sometimes it's not, but if it's possible, that whether it's walking or ballroom dancing, which I took up recently, or tennis, or whatever turns you on, to really keep moving. It's very bad for your body not to.
I've also heard and read that it's good for your brain to keep moving.
Apparently it is, which makes sense, because if you're moving, you have more, you're breathing better, you have more oxygen, and your brain is hungry for oxygen.
Right.
And I think another thing happens when you're moving, not just sitting in a chair and moving, although if that's all you can do, it's better than doing nothing. But when you're moving, you tend to be meeting people, you're outside, you may be walking a dog. I have a dog that
we're going to talk about.
We'll talk
about Bromley and pet therapy.
That's a whole different thing connected to my profession. But personally, he keeps me honest. I have to walk him 3 times a day, minimum. And I walk him at least 15 minutes each time. So if I didn't do anything else, I would be walking 45 minutes a day.
Right, that's tremendous.
Which is wonderful.
Now, you talked about how you'd taken up tango. Talk about that a little bit. What inspired you to do that, and where do you do it?
Well, what inspired me to do it, and I will say it out loud because I think we women need to say our ages out loud and be proud of them.
All right.
For my 80th birthday, which was in December, this past December, I gave myself a huge and wonderful party. I had 62 people, family, friends from business, friends from my ballet class, friends from my new apartment house. And I wanted to do what was on the top of my bucket list, which was an elegant Viennese waltz with a partner who knew how to dance. So Bromley, my dog, really led me to this. The place where I take him to be groomed happens to be right behind a Fred Astaire studio.
Another reason to have a dog.
Yes. So I walked.
About connecting you with others, in other words.
Connecting, that's right.
Yes.
I walked into that Fred Astaire studio one day, and I presented myself. I said, I'm Joan Blumenfeld. I'm about to be 80, and I am on my bucket list is to do an elegant Viennese waltz, and I would like to take some lessons here and dance like Ginger Rogers, or as close to that as I can.
And how close did you come?
Well, I would have to ask my audience.
Okay.
I feel like I'm very close. I don't know whether it looks like that, but I think it must not be bad because they've asked me to compete in a ballroom dance.
That's amazing. So did you start this at 79, approaching
I
80?
started it 6 weeks before my birthday party.
Oh.
And by my birthday party, after the first lesson, I hired this young man who's my teacher and his buddy to come to my 80th birthday party and dance with everybody. And I gave them only one instruction. I said, you can dance with anybody at my party, any kind of dancing you or they want to do, except if they play a Viennese waltz, it's mine.
That's for you. Now, Joan, you also do ballet, you told me.
I do.
And how long have you been doing that?
more years than I like to say, probably 40 at least.
Amazing.
I don't do point, of course, but I do a very nice bar. And all of it is what appeals to me. You know, if tennis or yoga or Pilates or wrestling or boxing.
Or just walking regularly.
Or walking, whatever it
Swimming.
is that, swimming. There's another woman in my ballet class who's actually 2 years older than I am, and she swims. And she feels as passionate about swimming as I do about ballroom dancing.
We had a man on this show, Art White, who was turning 99. He'll be turning 100 in June.
Wow.
And when I asked him if he exercised, he said, I don't exercise. But it turns out, as I quizzed him a little bit more, that he actually swims twice a week.
That's
he bowls
exercise.
Twice a week. He does things that the rest of us would call exercise, but I think because he enjoys it so much.
I was just going to say, and if you can find what you enjoy, I love walking. I mean, I don't love it in the middle of winter when it's dark in the morning and dark in the evening, or even today when you can get caught. But I love being outdoors. I love watching the shrubs and the flowers and the trees come and go in their season. I love the smell of the fresh air. I'm invigorated by walking, but some people don't love it. But I think Mr. White is correct. If you find the thing that you love to do, it doesn't feel like exercise. Most of us, if you say exercise, oh.
And you know, my mother started to use a walker recently because she's having some serious balance and gait issues. And she's still, actually the walker has really freed her up. She's walking up and down Timber Lane where she lives in Westport.
I bet.
And really getting out. So within the bounds of still being able to move.
And within the bounds of being safe.
Yes.
Everybody's different. I can do ballet because I've been doing it a long time, but I've changed it. You know, we older people have learned to adapt. And so I don't extend as high as I used to or as high as the 25-year-old in front of me on the bar does. And I regulate myself. I've actually done a wonderful thing this past week. It took courage. I told the ballet teacher that I needed to leave class early. I cannot do an hour and a half anymore. And if I do a whole hour and a half, I get annoyed and frustrated. I said, I'm going to do the bar, which is what I love to do, B-A-R-R-E.
Yes, yes, the bar.
Not B-A-R.
Right.
And do that well, and then maybe stay 15 minutes more, and that's all I have stamina for.
That's perfect. So you're knowing your limitations, but blossoming within them.
Right.
Let's move on and talk about the second precept, if you will. Keep working. Talk about how that's important and what you have done to keep working.
I'm lucky. I really am blessed in many ways, and one of them is about my work. I am a geriatric care manager, so being older myself is in many ways helpful because I've walked that walk. I know.
And you have a lot of credibility. Besides your credentials.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I know the culture, I know the songs. I was 12 years old when 10 when World War II started. It's my war, if you will. So that's a good thing.
So why is it important, though, to keep working? And by work, how do you define that? Does it have to be paid work or not?
Absolutely not. I define it as something meaningful. And for me, work, I am still able to work because I'm in private practice. I still have my faculties pretty much intact.
We talked about your work when we did a little pre-interview the other day, and you make 6 times what I make. So you're still making
money.
a very
I
good
didn't
salary.
start earning money until I was 50, and I was divorced and needed to earn money. Up until that time, I had been a full-time at-home mom. I love earning money. So work, if you can get paid for it, if you do the kind of work you can get paid for, I think it's very empowering for women, but that's perhaps another whole discussion.
Exactly.
But what I mean in terms of precepts about aging gracefully, you need a reason to get up in the morning. You have to have something, I think, you need something to do that's important to you, that's appreciated by others. Sitting home alone and not having any, which leads to the connection.
Which leads to the connection,
but,
exactly.
But I think it needs to have meaning for you. You need a reason to get up in the morning. Otherwise, why bother?
Now, one of your friends said about you, each time life gave you a lemon, you made a career of it.
That is true.
And that's so interesting. So take us kind of briefly through, you said you didn't start working until you were in your 50s. So start.
Well, let me go back to the first career. Well, I graduated from college as a nursery school teacher and with a bachelor's
at the
in
normal
education.
Time, in your early 20s.
And yes, and I was already married and of course interested in having children, and in fact, may I say that my oldest daughter was a classmate of yours,
yes,
which makes this
and
so
you're
dear.
a role model of mine.
This makes it so dear to be talking.
Yes.
So it was not surprising that nursery school interested me, and you know, how to raise children and what was important for them and so on. But I think the first paid career I had came as I was divorcing, and it was in the field of deafness.
Right, because your son Eric is
My
deaf.
son Eric was born deaf. And so that was a lemon in a way, and a blessing in some other ways. But it led me to need to learn a great deal about deafness. The who, what, why, when, where, and how. And ultimately, I got a call from the Commission on the Deaf one day. I had taken up interpreting, and the Commission on the Deaf wanted to know if I was available to work with a very wonderful, smart girl who was going in a very academically challenging private school, who needed an interpreter, an oral interpreter, because she was not signing.
Right.
And so I said, of course I am. And that child and her mother came right down from Hartford and sat on my porch, and that was my first paying job.
And what a wonderful job, because it also involved education. So it mattered. And as a matter of fact, as I was reading your bio, everything smoothly in some ways led.
Well, that's true about all my careers.
Yes.
Somehow they all kind of gel together. The glue is teaching and education in a lot of different manifestations.
Right. Teaching to the end.
Yeah.
Teaching all the way through.
And yes. And so then, because we needed to be divorced, which was a lemon of a different kind.
Exactly, can be such a shock.
It certainly was. And I went into psychotherapy.
You went back to school. You went to the University of Bridgeport.
I went back to school, but even before I went back to school, I went into therapy for myself to deal with the challenge of being divorced at almost 50 years old.
Isn't challenge a great word?
It is. It's a kind of a euphemism, but all this stuff really are challenges. And so I had been in psychotherapy myself and needed to have a career and was prepared to go back to graduate school, but I didn't know where or what. And I made a spreadsheet of all the things that I loved about. Because of Eric and because of who I am, I slipped into special ed in Westport, which had a regional center, and I was kind of the chief sub, K through 12, with every kind of special needs child you could possibly imagine.
So the spreadsheet, how does this connect to all of that?
Because I made a spreadsheet of what I liked about special ed, and I was thinking I would go back to graduate school and get a degree in special education. And then I thought, and I liked psychotherapy. I liked the process. I liked my psychotherapist. I thought that was a really interesting way to be teaching and working with people.
Right.
So the spreadsheet had two parts. One was special ed, one was psychotherapy. The more I looked at special ed, the more I didn't want to do it. I was about to be 50. I was about to be single. And I had worked very, very, very hard with my son and his sisters to raise up as good a family as I could.
So going into counseling and psychotherapy, really, there's a lot of
adults.
Flexibility, and you're with adults.
I didn't want to be with kids anymore.
Was the flexibility an issue?
Yes, because I went back to grad school. I did it in 3 years while I was interpreting for the deaf child.
Yes.
And it was much more flexible. School, you have to show up 5 days a week, 8 to 4 or whatever.
Exactly, and there's planning.
Psychotherapy, you can plan it take charge of that more.
So something similar happened in terms of getting into geriatric care management.
Exactly.
Your elderly parents were...
I found myself being very involved with not the hands-on care, but the care management for my mother and stepfather, who were in their late 80s. Mother had Alzheimer's. He had some medical issues.
And your mother died at 95, so she
lived. And he died at 98.
Oh,
so they lived
amazing.
a very long time and required a lot of care management, which I did from my heart. It was a labor of love. But in addition, or I should say, and in addition, I had an aunt that I loved who was out in Chicago, going through the same kinds of issues, except there was nobody there. Her son had died. She'd moved to Chicago to be with him, near him. He died. His wife moved back to California. She was alone. Of all the members of my family, of my generation, I was it.
You were it, I know.
Which was
I'm it
okay.
in my family, yes.
But there's always one it.
I know. Frequently a woman, not always.
Most often a woman, but not always. So I was going to New York once a week, closing my practice for the day, driving into the city between 10 and 3 to avoid rush hour traffic, to make sure things were okay with my parents, and once or twice a month getting on a plane and going to Chicago to see everything was all. Couldn't do it. It was a killer.
So did you end up having a geriatric care manager for yourself?
Well, I ended
to deal with all of that.
I ended up having one in Chicago.
Okay.
I kept doing it in New York. That was fine. I could do that. And I hired the help for them, and I helped with the transition of getting them into the nursing home, because ultimately that's what they needed.
Right.
But in Chicago, someone, actually, I didn't even know there was such a profession. And a social worker said, you ought to get a care manager for your aunt.
Why don't we talk about what that profession is? And by the way, you have a website, www.joanblumenfeld.com,
Yes.
that people can go on and find out more of what you do.
Absolutely.
You have a blog called Pearls of Wisdom, which I'm going to read from in a minute or so.
Okay.
But talk about what a geriatric care manager does.
With my parents, for example, I hired the aide that they needed because Mother was going to get lost in the city and needed
because she
help.
held Alzheimer's, exactly.
And my father needed help getting in and out of the tub and personal hygiene and care. I arranged for them to go to the Lenox Hill Senior Center, which my mother, who was then pushing 90, said, they're too old for me.
Don't you love that? Your mother had a great attitude, by the way.
She did.
She was a role model for you.
She was. She felt like she was 45 inside. I know she did. And she was no matter what happened, she had open heart surgery when she was 74, and a year later she was on a camel in Egypt. Those were the kind of people they were.
That's amazing.
But the care management, it really is advocating for the frail elderly person when they can't do it so well themselves, or when there are no children, like my aunt had nobody there.
So coordinating care, advocating if somebody goes in the hospital,
absolutely.
Perhaps?
Finding whatever the resources are, whether the resource is a cook to come in and do the cooking, or a well-qualified aide to do personal care, or a fine adult day program so people aren't isolated and sitting around looking at TV.
Sounds like you've picked a very timely profession as the boomers age,
Yes.
and more of us have
That's
parents
right.
ourselves who are aging.
That's right.
Exactly.
And I think for young people that are considering the field, it's a very good choice. There's good training. Now it requires certification. Well, it doesn't require it. It's probably desirable, but the state doesn't require it.
Let's talk a little bit about attitude, because that's something else, and we need to go back and talk about connection, although we've talked about that a little bit.
Can I
as we've
just
been
add a
going through.
piece about my practice,
Of
which
course
is
you
Bromley?
can. Yes.
Bromley
Bromley is your dog.
Bromley is my dog. He's an extraordinary little Maltese. I've trained him up to be a registered therapy dog. And he's not what my practice is about, but he's not incidental either, both to my sanity personally and to the work I do with other people. And I got a puppy because my significant other was in a nursing home and was dying.
So that's a lemon
another
made into,
lemon.
If not a career, an aspect of your career, pet
Right.
therapy.
And so I got the puppy, which is another story. But I trained him up to be a therapy dog. And he's certainly an asset to my practice, as anyone who looks at my website will see.
Right. So do you bring him along with you sometimes?
I bring him with me everywhere that he's welcome and never anywhere where he's not welcome.
Wonderful.
So he goes to hospital. He goes to Norwalk Hospital, but I have to bring his papers with me.
Right, because he's a therapy dog and he has to be indicated as such.
And have his rabies shots and all of that.
Exactly.
So yes, and most people really. I took him today to someone who's bedridden, but she focuses on him and she pets him.
And it gets people outside of themselves.
Absolutely, and it does lower their blood pressure. I have no doubt.
It's wonderful. So talking about attitude, and then we're going to go back to connection if there's time, because attitude is a big piece of this, and you write about this in one of your Pearls of Wisdom, one of your blog entries. You say, I loathe the idea of anything being anti-aging, that terminology, anti-aging, cosmetics, etc., etc. The phrase reeks of prejudice against me and a whole group of remarkable women. What I do believe has helped me age gracefully are good genes. You've certainly had those. With your mother, by the way, what age do you feel like you are inside? Could you put a figure on it?
Not 45. I actually, 80's a big birthday. It's bigger than the 70, 60, 50, 40.
Do you feel 80? Or do we even know what that means
I don't know
anymore?
what it means to feel 80.
Okay, we'll move on, because I understand that. We
I
don't
really
know what
don't.
it means. People are all different ways at 80 these days, aren't they?
That's true.
It's very hard to stereotype. So what I do believe has helped me age gracefully are good genes, good luck, and good attitude. You say good attitude is the part you can mold for yourself. To me, good attitude means, and I'm going to let you, instead of reading it, talk about what good attitude means to you. What does that mean as you age?
I don't remember what I said there. That it means.
I can give you hints if you need some help.
Well, I just want to go back to good luck because I don't want to underestimate it.
Right.
You know, anybody can walk off a curb and get smacked by a truck or break a bone.
And some people, even psychologically, are more prone to depression than
Yes.
others, etc.
I think we can aid good luck. I mean, some people just really have very bad luck. I was lucky where I was born. And I've been, knock on wood, I'm superstitious.
Knock on wood, too.
I'm lucky in many ways. So good luck is a piece of it. But attitude is really what you can control. So life-giving, well, go ahead, tell me what I said.
I'll help you. It says, to me, good attitude means qualities that help you survive life's challenge with spirit. This is the point where you can add in about sparkles. What's that great line
I'm going to
that you
make a
have?
bumper sticker. Keep moving and wear sparkles. And you can't see it, but my toenails have blue sparkles.
Keep moving and wear sparkles, so that help you survive life's challenges with spirit. Those qualities are flexibility, adaptability, resourcefulness, curiosity. I think it's so important.
To keep, I should say, keep moving and keep learning.
Yes, and that has to do with curiosity.
And then if you do that, then we've talked about it before. People of all ages will want to talk with you.
Yes, and multi-generational friendships are so important as well, and you and I have talked about that. And you know, I've put off talking about connected to the end. I want to stick on the topic of attitude here for a few moments, because if you keep moving, if you keep working, if you have a good attitude and wear sparkles, you will be connected. And if you stay curious, you will be connected.
I think that's true.
All of those things.
And another word that's a piece of being connected is engaged. I like that word, engaged. And I don't mean a big ring with a sparkling stone,
I know you don't
although
mean that.
there's nothing wrong with that. But engaged in the world. You don't have to be up to date on the latest in politics, although it helps.
And you can be engaged until almost the very, very end.
Yes, I think that's true.
Yeah, and keep learning, keep growing.
I flew in back home from Minneapolis just yesterday, and when I went to my seat, I always like an aisle seat, And I went to sit down, and lo and behold, there's a young couple next to me with a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And first, I mean, the baby was adorable, but my heart sank. I thought, oh my Lord, 3 hours of listening to a baby crying, that's going to be hard. Turned out the baby, her name was Clara.
Oh,
like the
lovely
nutcracker,
name.
like the nutcracker, the Clara in the
Yes.
nutcracker. She was an angel, and she slept. She gooed and gurgled. She was just, this young family was just blessed.
And talk about babies.
But we got engaged right away.
Yes.
My heart sank. I thought, oh, it's going to be a nightmare of a trip, but thank goodness it's only 3 hours. But instead of doing that and kind of sitting in my seat and ignoring them and thinking about how awful the trip was going to be, I engaged them right away.
And it's the hallmark of a baby to be interested in the world around him or her, to be engaged. And when you think of it, they're so compelling, babies are. Because
they are, if you allow them to be. And
Exactly.
little Clara was. Little Clara is 8 months old, and she doesn't speak, but she clearly wanted to be engaged. She couldn't take her eyes off of me. So I kept my eyes on her and talked with her father and her mother. And then the baby went to sleep so I could read a good book. So it was, but engaged is about being open yourself to contact with other people,
Exactly.
as well as reaching out to them.
So I think, we're out of time. Believe it or not, it's gone very fast, and there's more I'd like to talk
We
about,
always
but I don't
have
have
lots
time.
to talk about.
But I think this idea of being engaged is the crux of which everything else revolves around, including having that great attitude that you have. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing that
My
attitude
pleasure.
with us. And I want to thank all of you for watching today. And remember, when it comes to aging, attitude really, really counts. Thank you so much.